GeekBiz.
A few months ago, Taylor, creator of the Laravel framework, tweeted about event system in Laravel, asking followers if they use events on a regular basis in their projects. Looking at the replies, I was a bit surprised to find out that events aren't that popular really. This lesson will show how events can make your code easier to read, understand, and maintain. Let's take a look at this simple user registration controller. At some point, user hits this register method where user account is created. Let's imagine that later we want to send user a welcome email, a pretty standard thing to do. That's very easy to achieve in Laravel. Let's just use the mail facade. Okay, later we want to export user to MailChimp as well. Also nothing exotic here, a pretty common thing to do. So I will use type hinting. I will get my MailChimp class here, and I'm just gonna call export on it. Super simple. Okay, now we want to send a Slack notification as well to notify our team that some new users signed up. Okay, we'll use Slack facade here, and I'm gonna send this to this channel, and I'm gonna render this view. I'm gonna pass the user. Okay, it's fine. Our controller method is now growing, but it's okay. And now we realize that when the user changes details of his account, we need to resync to MailChimp, because now the data in MailChimp is kind of outdated. So, okay, we have another controller called settings controller. This is where users can change their account details. So we head here, and okay, it's simple. We'll just type in the same MailChimp class, and we will call export. Okay, done. Very simple. Okay, now we realize that we have a little bit of code repetition, like we have the same MailChimp export code in register controller and in settings controller. Okay, we could use a model observer class here instead, so we could move all MailChimp there. So let's create a user observer class, and we will use a saving method because it's going to be called every time a user is being saved. So it will cover both signups and updates. Okay, so we move our MailChimp export here. I'm going to use app service resolution to get my MailChimp class. Okay, and it's done. So we managed to avoid any code repetition. But now it's a bit harder to follow the sign-up flow. Like some logic is in the controller, some logic is in the observer. Why don't we try to use events instead? Events are how we tell stories in real life. So events are a much more intuitive way to reason about software. Consider this example from real life. You wake up in the morning, you open Twitter and start scrolling. Unfortunately, you see a spoiler for the final episode of Game of Thrones, posted by a friend of yours. You get angry. In fact, you will be in a pretty bad mood all day. Also, you click unfollow on your friend's profile. So what happened here? Your friend posted a spoiler. How did you react? Got angry and unfollowed him. This is how you describe things in life, events and outcomes. You get to your office later. Your colleagues see your gloomy face and then ask, "What's wrong?" What do you answer? You say you're angry because a friend of yours spoiled Game of Thrones for you. Event, reaction. Imagine if instead people said stuff like, "My friend made me angry and made me unfollow him by making a post web request with a plain text body that spoils a TV show," because this is how controller methods read. Now back to our sign up process. User signed up is an event and we want to react to it. What do we want to do? We want to send a welcome email. Why? Because user signed up. Also, we want to export data to MailChimp because user signed up. And also we want to notify our team via Slack. Why? Because user signed up. Look how easy it is to read an event service provider. It's becoming an amazing documentation of your app. It has a list of events that could happen in your app and a list of actions to take shall they happen. So events are really just a way to use real life reasoning in software instead of all that cryptic imperative structures. No matter how smart of a developer you are, believe me, it will take you less effort to read an event service service provider instead of controllers and observers. Now imagine your colleague comes to you and asks, what do we do when user signs up? You look for the right controller, find the right method, go through lines of code to understand, then you give a reply. But hey, maybe you missed something because you didn't look in the observer. With events, you just go straight to the event service provider, and you can actually just show your colleague the list of listeners for the user signed up event. It's all plain English, it's all readable, not cryptic at all. People say routes file in Laravel is the documentation. Well, event service provider can be an even better piece of documentation. If you name your events and listeners nicely, it will read way better than the best maintained routes file ever. On top of all of that, you get a very simple way to toggle certain features on and off. See how easy it is to comment out a listener in the event service provider. Listeners can be async jobs too. They can be processed later from a queue. Lines of code in the controller cannot be processed asynchronously. If one line fails, everything fails, and there's no way to rerun it from the place where it broke. So I would say there are two main advantages of using events in Laravel. Number one is real life reasoning, and number two is nice decoupling.